This is episode number 207 of the Amor y Amargo podcast, and in this episode, we are going to focus on the holidays and making some great Christmas cocktails, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the Amor y Amargo podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Christmas cocktails, and who better to have as part of this conversation than Sother Teague. He is a beverage director of Amor y Amargo, co-host of the Speakeasy on Heritage Radio Network, and author of a couple books. I'm just here for the drinks, and let's get blitzing for holiday cocktails. So welcome to the show, Sother. How you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, your first book, I'm Just Here for the Drinks, just was amazing. It was a fantastic book and highly recommend it for anybody that's looking for a good holiday gift, as well as your second book as well. But I kind of have to ask, what made you really interested in writing a Christmas cocktail book?
I mean, it's a festive time of year and people love to entertain, as we do. I always say my job in life is to throw a party every night. And now that I have multiple bars, I throw multiple parties every night. So I understand the desire to want to host and, be that sort of center of attention at the gathering. And I think, here in America for sure, and the rest of the world too, the holiday we gather around the most, I think, is Christmas, right? Christmas and Thanksgiving. So I just wanted to write something that was, it's pocket sized, it's a quarter size book. So it fits in a stocking. It's a stocking stuffer. It's got some cool quotes that I love from holiday movies that I enjoy, and some very cool artwork, and some cocktails that I think are, appropriate for the season.
Fantastic. And when you started doing some research over like some of the cocktails that you're going to put in there, did you come across any really cool like international drinking holiday traditions?
Not so many. There are things that we associate with cold weather drinking, but I don't think we necessarily have anything that's directly associated with Christmas or any of the Christmas adjacent holidays. But a lot of like mulled wines, hot toddies, eggnogs, things like that. And I think it's kind of a shame. I think some of these drinks deserve a greater seat in the pantheon than just to be relegated to this time of year. Granted, I wouldn't maybe want an eggnog on the hottest day of summer, but an eggnog in the spring is quite delicious,
Yeah, and I think there's a lot we can pull from like holiday or winter cocktails too, as well. But I'm gonna have to try an eggnog during the spring. I haven't had that opportunity yet.
Right. I think we pigeonhole things. I think that's just human nature in general, but certainly around food and drink, I think even it's a funny litmus test you can do to ask people like, when's the last time you ate turkey? And people say, oh, probably last Thanksgiving. Meanwhile, turkey's the number one selling, deli meat, right? So I think you just forget that you do this thing. We drink all the time. We drink rum all the time. We drink drinks that have cream in them, especially like say maybe a pina colada, which has coconut cream. Why wouldn't you drink an eggnog, out on the beach?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's a good point. Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we get like in this mindset of like the winter equals, these warm, cozy kind of heavier cocktails, but they could be enjoyed anytime, really.
Yeah.
So when you think about holidays, and I think this is kind of a segue into kind of our next topic, but what are some of the flavors that you typically gravitate towards on those winter and Christmas style or kind of seasonal drinks?
I mean, personally, for me, I'm going to be drawn towards classics in general, but during those colder times, during those times when you want to be wearing a sweater, heavy flannel shirt, and sitting next to a fire and gathered around your friends, I'm drawn to more like darker spirits, to be honest. I'm looking at American whiskeys for sure. I'm looking at Scotch whiskey as well. I'm definitely leaning into brandies, cognac, Armagnac. Those are the kind of things that I want, in those times of year. It just makes sense,
Yeah, absolutely. And then for like the ingredient side of like, like syrups that you're making and tinctures that you're going for, or bitters, like what are kind of those like baking spices or fruits or herbs that you're kind of really reaching for to bring to really accentuate the winter cocktails?
I mean, you nailed it on the head right there. Baking spices, right? I'm looking at you, allspice, which has the flavors of all spices: cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, anise, ginger. mace. Those are all inside of that one spice, which is kind of a miracle spice, I think. But any of those on their own can be held forward or exemplified in cocktails or in food as well. It's just it's kind of like what grows together goes together. Why not have an apple brandy old fashioned with a heavy cinnamon syrup and some tiki bitters, which have nutmeg, mace, and ginger, alongside of a slice of grandma's apple pie, which probably has all of those, or at least most of those flavors in it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, those are definitely kind of those focuses that I always gravitate towards as well during the holidays. And is there any kind of, as you think about some of the mixers that you start to bring into your bar or even at home when you're entertaining, are there any specific mixers that kind of really work well during the holidays?
I mean, yeah, again, it's time of year, so you want to reach for things that are available out there. I make a delicious pumpkin syrup. I make a pumpkin seed orgeat, which is quite good as well. Those are timely to the holiday time of year. And then, apple cider is abundant and everywhere. So I use a lot of apple cider in drinks at this time of year as well. Those are things that pop to mind right away.
Yeah, and then I can imagine like a apple cider, maybe in a mule or something like that, to kind of accentuate some of those ginger notes, and kind of to your point about the allspice and all the flavors in there. Sound like they kind of would go really, really well together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even ones that you don't think of, again, we've got to get ourselves out of that mindset. Pineapple, the flavor of pineapple juice, which certainly speaks to summer. It also pairs quite well with those same flavors that I just mentioned. And I think that's because when it's strange, but when we think of what we consider winter spices, baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, all those ones I just mentioned before, they all originate on islands where winter never visits, right? So we've just kind of pigeonholed them into this place that they don't necessarily work. But again, with the what grows together goes together statement, all those island spices certainly go with fruits that come from those islands. So you can even bring, like I said, pineapple for sure, which just has a richness, but like passion fruit has a place in this canon as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting idea. Like, are there some traditional flavors or some flavors that aren't traditionally associated with winter and Christmas that you love pulling into cocktails just to kind of get that mental like break, that snap for somebody like, oh, holy cow, this is outside of what I was expecting?
I mean, nothing comes to mind straight away. But I think that you just have to go into it with an open mind. I was mixing a lot of these holiday drinks with creme de cacao, bringing chocolate flavors in, but I think we still associate sort of candies and chocolates and rich things with holiday time. So that still seems to line up to me.
Yeah. And so when we talk about kind of some of the classic cocktails that come to mind with drinking during the holidays, what are some of the classic ones that you always kind of reach for?
I mean, we mentioned the eggnog. That's, of course, holiday. Got holidays written all over it. But I think cocktails that you wouldn't necessarily think of that are related to the holiday would be like a French 75, right? It's kind of a gin or cognac lemonade that's been enhanced with some sparkling wine or champagne. And at first, maybe lemonade doesn't sound holiday, but what does sound holiday is champagne, right? We're going to drink a lot of champagne on New Year's, and that's real close to Christmas. Plus, just being around your friends and your family, you want to celebrate, and celebrations always start with champagne, right? So that comes to mind right away. And then hot toddies, of all variety, and then buttering those hot toddies, something as simple as hot water, lemon, and Scotch whiskey can be elevated by then adding, another layer of richness by adding in a compound butter, where you take some butter, fold in some spices. I do what I call the hot butternut, where I fold in pureed butternut squash along with all those winter spices into my butter, and then a lump of that into a hot drink that lets it melt, and the butter sits on top. It's a real creamy experience.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah. It is.
A little bit decadent, a little bit rich, a little bit like perfect for the holidays too.
Yeah, and squeak in a little bit of vegetables too. Right. You want to get the kids to eat the vegetables, squeak it in with alcohol.
There you go. Drink your vegetables.
Yeah, let's all drink responsibly out there.
Right.
And then another one that certainly comes to mind, but that I do a slight twist on as well, is I make my own hot chocolate, dried hot chocolate mix. In my mix, I add in at the finish a bit of cayenne pepper, so it has a little bit of like this chocolatey heat happening, and then add that, of course, to some milk or some non-dairy substitute for milk, and heat it up and fold in some. I like it with bourbon myself, but you fold in anything you like, frankly.
Yeah, so spiked hot chocolate with a little bit of like a heat element from a chili. That sounds really nice and kind of perfectly warm for the holidays too.
Yeah, just enough to get your attention. I don't want it to be something that you're suffering through. Just enough cayenne pepper to let you know, get a little tickle in the back of your throat. And then if you're feeling super adventurous, you can. And I'm just here for the drinks. I feature that cocktail as well, and in that one I also feature my recipe for house-made chartreuse marshmallows. So you can make this like slightly sweet, slightly spicy hot chocolate, and then drop in a house-made herbal chartreuse marshmallow to finish it off.
Chartreuse and chocolate have this amazing pairing together, and I think it's probably one of the, like, people don't really go for that flavor combination, but it works really, really well together.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Chocolate and chartreuse are I think fast friends.
Yeah, I had a regular that came in, and we had a really nice kind of rich root beer that we had on tap, and he added a shot of chartreuse to it, and it was one of the most magical, like 2-part mixer cocktails I've ever had in my entire life. So it made me want to explore a lot more, what chartreuse really blends with, and there's a lot of options out there, that's for sure.
Well, when you've got a product like chartreuse, which boasts 160 botanicals, you have to assume that almost anything you add to it is going to go with something that's in there. So you've got a good, it's a pretty target-rich environment.
Right, exactly.
Interesting that we're bringing this up today when literally yesterday I was having a conversation about an absinthe and root beer highball, which I'm bound to try because, since we spoke last, I've opened up a new bar this past Friday, actually, called Café de l'Enfer, which means the cafe from hell. And our whole menu is champagne and absinthe. I've got 10 champagne cocktails and 9 champagne cocktails and 10 absinthe cocktails on the menu.
Oh man. Well, congratulations on opening the bar. And I'm very surprised that we're even having this conversation then.
Always happy to take time to sit down with you.
That's awesome. But yeah, definitely congratulations. And I think next time we come into New York, we'll definitely have to kind of hit some of the spots you got going on over there.
Yeah. Love to host you.
Yeah. And so what are, we talked about some of the classic cocktails and some of the spins that you've put on them, but are there any kind of modern style drinks that you really gravitate towards? Maybe some that you feature in your book?
I mean, I'm kind of known out there as somewhat of a traditionalist. I don't necessarily do the old school Mr. Potato Head method where I just substitute something for something and call it something else. But generally, the builds that I put together are based on classic methodology.
Sure.
But I do like to bring things to the table that maybe haven't been before. I have one in Let's Get Blitzen that's called the Herbalist Tea. And it uses Del Herbarista, which means the herbalist in Italian, which is one of my favorite Amari. It's a gentian and honey Amaro. So right away, this notion of gentian, which is a flower, which many teas are made of, and honey, it makes me think of a hot drink. So I just added a small, tiny amount of peated scotch to boost up some smoky notion in there, along with some lemon juice and house-made ginger syrup, and we serve that one hot with a big dose of hot water. So it becomes this very tea-like cocktail, but has a surprisingly bitter and sharp aspect from the Del Herbarista and the ginger. It's unique to note that Del Herbarista, again, being a gentian Amaro, they have their own apiary, their own beehives to collect their own honey, and those bees are pollinating those gentian flowers. And if you've ever had clover honey or blueberry honey, the bees are pollinating those clovers or those blueberries. You can taste the fruit in the honey. In this case, you can taste bitterness in the honey. The honey is bittersweet already.
Oh, that's crazy.
Which just turns out to make this fantastic cocktail. So I don't know if that's like way off the beaten path, but I do incorporate things that I think are a little bit, unusual or unique into formulas that I think are familiar. So like This one sounds like a cup of hot tea, and it presents like a cup of hot tea, and it is not a cup of hot tea.
Sounds like it's a little bit of a flavor journey, though, kind of like knock you on your butt if you're not too careful.
Oh, absolutely. And the aroma is just outstanding. This big burst of almost, chamomile-like with those flowers in the gentian, that little bit of smoke from a peated scotch. I use Lafroig in that one. And then a little bit of zip of ginger on the backside. It kind of almost maybe sort of would fall into some kind of strange way of getting to a hot version of the penicillin.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that being really good, though, and a bit surprising if I had to guess.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ones that people are, they may be drawn to it for its weirdness, then they are surprised at how, how approachable it is.
That's awesome. That sounds good. Any other ones that you tend to gravitate towards during the holidays?
I mean, as I said, I think I'd like to put champagne on top of everything, and maybe that's just what's in my mind from opening a champagne bar. But every time I'm around my family and friends during the holidays, everything becomes a royale, right? And whatever you're drinking a Manhattan, top it up with some champagne. Anything can be. I think Dave Wondrich is famous for having said that anything can be made better with a bit of champagne, and I don't disagree. But I do like to drink classics mostly. But we can alter those classics to fit the seasons, So instead of a classic Negroni at the holiday time of year, I might be sipping on a Boulevardier using an American whiskey instead. I may slip into there in some arrangement. I'll cut down on the vermouth and bring up maybe a liqueur or an Amaro, like Cafe Amaro from J. Rieger in Kansas City. And then suddenly I've got this sort of bourbon and coffee bitter Negroni situation going on in my hand, and I can sit there and sip on it while I catch up with my friends and enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, that sounds pretty tasty right there.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure, do you make a lot of vodka cocktails, or do you have any in the book that you usually point people towards?
I don't actually. And I think that comes from, honestly, my time as a chef. I was a chef for 12 years. And I kind of always think back to making the sort of the bones of any soup or sauce that's going to happen. And those bones are literally bones. They are stocks, right? So my sort of comparison has always been, I can definitely make you some soup, but I would give you, the user, the choice. Do I begin making that soup with stock, or do I begin making it with water? And I think the overwhelming answer that I get from people is, well, of course, start with stock, right?
Right.
I don't think that water doesn't have a place in the pantheon. Of course it does. We need water. So I don't think that vodka doesn't have a place in the pantheon. But I think that, generally speaking, if I'm going to build a cocktail, I'm going to start with something that has more flavor than vodka.
That's a really great description, too. I've never had it kind of presented in that way. So I think it brings a lot of, I mean,
I'm on record in a few places, I think, as having said, I believe I do drink vodka, by the way. I always have a bottle in my freezer. It's I want it as cold as it can be without having to dilute it, because it doesn't need any dilution. It's already, doesn't have any structured flavor of its own. So I don't want to add any water to the equation.
Sure.
So I keep it in the freezer, and then I drink it in short glasses, and nip it. And for me, vodka, the mixer for vodka is food, right? I want to have a bag, something as simple as a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips. I want to have something fatty and rich, like some pate or some, sausage plate, which, again, certainly let's stack this up for the holiday season. You've got all those things on hand, everybody's snacking, but let's just have short glasses of vodka, rocket cold, and something either fatty or salty or both to pair with it.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be in my freezer now, heading into the holidays for sure. That's actually that's probably going to be happening. So, kind of in a similar vein, though, when we talk about holiday cocktails, a lot of people aren't drinking for whatever reason. Do you make spirit-free cocktails in your bars, or for yourself, for guests at home?
Well, I don't in the bars, but I am starting to. In fact, you've caught me. I'm at work right now, working diligently on putting together a comprehensive non-alcoholic cocktail list that I can employ at all my spaces, which by the way are now numbered 10. I have 10
Nice.
spaces.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we get a lot of requests for non-alcoholic, which has never been really my forte. At Amor y Amargo, my oldest bar, literally the only thing in the entire room that isn't alcoholic is water. I always say I have flat, frozen, or bubbly, because I do have seltzer water. But every other item on the bar is alcoholic. There's no way for me to make a non-alcoholic cocktail in there.
Sure.
But in the other bars, we do have juices and things like that. And what we're striving to do is create a list that is thoughtful and comprehensive so that we can embrace those folks who want to come in and enjoy our space and enjoy their friends in our space, but simply don't want to have a cocktail for whatever reason. I don't care what your reasoning is, frankly. But then we want to be able to let them know that we didn't just whip this together when you got here. We were prepared for you and we knew you were coming. So I'm really sitting down and doing some deep dive research into the notion of non-alcoholic, but more sort of adult beverages. And I am going to maybe take my own twist on it. And the likelihood right now is about 100%, but that may change as the research continues, that I'm going to call them on the menu non-intoxicating, because I'm going to take as much liberty as I can with the legal definition of non-alcoholic, which allows for up to 0.05% of alcohol per cocktail. So that'll allow me to use bitters. That'll allow me to, maybe sneak in a bit of extract, which extracts are alcoholic, or even maybe very, very small doses per volume of some kind of liqueur to up the ante on the flavor.
Sure.
So they'll be called non-intoxicants, right? So just like you can go to the grocery store and buy a non-alcoholic beer, which still has, again, up to 0.05% ABV per volume and is considered by the government non-alcoholic. I think I'm going to go with that rule on my lists.
I like that. And it gives you a lot more tools at your disposal, especially if you already have the ingredients in-house. I think that makes a ton of sense. And I can't wait to see the cocktails they come up with. Yeah,
they're gonna be a lot of fun. Again, I was a chef for 12 years, so I think the focus will take me back to the kitchen quite a bit. I'm gonna be back in the kitchen doing a lot of stuff. I don't think that I'm gonna just put out a list of like, oh, add this juice and that juice. It's gonna be some stuff that we work on and we perfect over time, and we're very proud of. I think it's, again, important to me on a number of levels, not the least of which is a business side. I know that this podcast, we don't talk maybe much about business, but the business side of me says it's going to be difficult for me to charge my guest what I need to charge them to take up my seat if I haven't put some work in.
Right. It's true.
I can't just say, here's some cranberry juice and soda. It's $16, which are what the cocktails sort of start at.
Right.
But if I say we went in the kitchen and we made this and we fermented that and we put our effort into this and we made this beautiful thing, then I can charge for it.
Right.
Which is better for the business at large, and it's also better for my team. Right. It's difficult for my team to justify, frankly, when they're caught off guard without a list on their hands and they just have to make something up on the fly, probably when they're as busy as they can be, and then to go through a lot of what at that point seems like extra effort, extra work, extra load, to hand them something and only be able to charge them a few dollars because the bottom line is it wasn't, thoughtful.
Right.
Then they get paid. Of course we pay them well, but they get paid via basically, they get tipped, right? So
right.
if they have to hand this over and all that work that they did, and then just to be like, oh, it's $5, what's the return for them? So they're not incentivized, right? So we want to incentivize the entire team by putting together things that we can all be proud of and get people to get on board and come in and have those drinks and enjoy the space.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is, I know you by reputation. I know your reputation is very thoughtful. You put a lot of thought into your business and how you approach hospitality. So I think the thoughtfulness that goes behind that also, like, what is my guest going to get at the end of the day? Does it match what I'm really trying to give them? I think is really important as well. So very cool. And like I said, I can't wait to see some of the items that come out. And definitely going to be ordering the book. And I think I'm going to have a bottle of vodka in my freezer during the holidays from now on, probably all the time now, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I mean, you should. It comes in handy more often than you think.
Right.
And again, there's actually 3 things that are in my freezer all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would encourage you and I would encourage your listener to do the same. There's always a bottle of vodka in there. By the way, it's Stoli, just for anyone asking. People always ask, and there's plenty of reasons for that. But we can get into them another time or now if you want. But and then I also always have a bottled, ready to go, diluted, a bottle of each, a martini and a Manhattan.
Oh, interesting.
And those aren't necessarily for me. Those are for those times when someone just happens to pop over, so that I'm always kind of ready and prepared to offer. Again, I think it's just my lifelong term in hospitality that's made me kind of always just want to be ready to take care of anyone at any moment.
It's funny because that was one of the last questions I was going to ask you is like, what are some of the things you always have kind of at the ready to entertain, or if there's any kind of large format that you love to kind of bring out during the holidays, especially if you're, you got 30 things to do, you got a whole house full of people. Like, is there any kind of go-to large format that people can make ahead?
Sure. I mean, we got a few of those in Let's Get Blitzen, because that's the point, right? You want to hang out with your family, your friends, your team, whatever. So many of the cocktails in here are easily scaled up, or honestly, you scale them down if you just want one. I've just got the recipe in here for the large batches on some of them. Easy ones to think about. We already spoke about the eggnog, of course. That's always a holiday hit, and it can hang around. There's all kinds of mulled wines and punches that you can have on hand as well. And then here's one that might tickle your listeners' interests. I do a sour that I call the 90-day sour, which is exactly what it sounds like. I make it 90 days out, and the sort of reactions that happen between the alcohol and the citrus juice in there in that 90 days creates a much more interesting and depth of flavor cocktail result. And I've gone even further with that one. Each year I pull out 1 liter, have it bottled in 500 milliliters, so 2 500 milliliter bottles of what this Christmas will be my 6-year-old sour. Same recipe, but is now 6 years old. So I'll pull out 2 500s and we crack them open at holiday time and just taste them to see what has changed or what hasn't changed from the year before. We also often, if we're doing this at my house, I'll whip up a sour right there on the spot, and we'll taste it side by side. So we've got, one that's brand new and one that's soon to be 6 years old.
So you have a 6-year vertical flight of aged sours.
Yeah, kind of. Well, I don't have the vertical flight of them all, right? I should have thought of that. Each year I should have made more, right? And bottled it, and then I could have had that. But at this point, what I'll do is, like I said, we'll crack open one of the ones that's aged, and we'll make a fresh one. We'll have a fresh one side by side with an old one.
That's awesome. That's super cool.
It is pretty cool, and it helps me to prove some points, and it helps me, as you said, I do believe myself to be a somewhat thoughtful person. It helps me to get across to people, there's nothing evil or wrong with preparing cocktails in advance. Again, as a chef, you wouldn't be angry with me when you got to my place, and if I went ahead and made the soup before you were coming, right? I prepared it in advance because I knew you were coming. That's why I did it in advance. I put this 90-day sour on the menu at Rye when I was the head bartender over there 12 or so years ago. And it was great and people loved it. But it also, for me, it was just proving a point. I just wanted to say, look, this doesn't go bad. What is a sour? It's spirits, it's some sort of sweetener, and it's some citrus, right? Well, that sweetener is got sugar in it, and sugar is a preservative. We all know and agree that alcohol is a preservative. You're telling me that if I put juice in 2 different preservatives, it's going to go bad? I disagree. It changes, but it doesn't go bad. So again, each year we taste it and we see what the changes are. But I would tell you flatly that it has not changed in probably 3 years. The first 90 days, you start to get a little bit of caramelization or caramel-like flavors. Around the 1 year mark, you get a real texture change. It turns into this velvety, silky thing that's very much like a Luza. I don't know if you've ever had a Luza before.
No, I don't think I have. No.
Luza is a line of juice nectars. You see them in there. They're in these real tall, weird bottles at the grocery store. But they have this very velvety, silky texture. So I would say the texture has changed the most. And then it gets to a point where it kind of stops. Sure. So we just taste it every year because it's fun, and we get to say we drank something that's 6 years old, and or it'll be 6 this year. And then but largely it got to a point, and then it stopped the process.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's probably an interesting conversation to have. Room full of friends and comparing notes and stuff like that too. Well,
yeah, as you might imagine, that room full of friends for me is a bunch of nerds who like to drink and talk about drinking. So, the conversations get pretty lively.
Yeah, throw a bunch of alcohol in that room, no problems. I mean, I can't see anything wrong.
Yeah.
And so,
well, I always bring one of those two. And I only do a liter a year because I'm trying to make this thing go as long as I can. If I stay on pace, I have enough to go for 10 years.
Nice.
But I always bring one of those half liters over to Robert Simonson's house for his holiday party every year at his apartment here in New York. He's the spirits writer for the New York Times and a good friend of mine. So we definitely have a lot of cool conversations.
That's pretty great, though. I love the fact that you're just kind of bringing these out and tasting them, and I bet it's a lot of fun to just sit there and talk about them.
Yeah.
So other than that, I mean, you're a busy guy. You got 10 bars going on right now. You always got something going, the radio host and the books and everything else. I hate to even ask, but what's next, man?
A bunch of things are next, and thanks for asking. The holidays are coming up, and every year at the holidays, I do something unique to, sort of like, pitch out to my audience. So I just solidified it today. So this is hot news. It seems odd also that I haven't done this before, but I'm making for the first time my own bitters. I did a collaboration. I did a collaboration once before with Eric Castro of Polite Provisions, very good friend of mine, where we did Polite Amor bitters, right? Amor y Amargo and Polite Provisions. And that was through Scrappy's. But this one is my own bitters. It's going to be grapefruit and cinnamon. I'm only making 300 bottles. I'm going through King Floyd's. They're an outfit out in Northern California that I like a lot. And we're going to do 300 100 milliliter bottles of grapefruit cinnamon. And if you're cocktail nerd at all, which I assume the audience is, that should ring a bell, right? That's kind of Don's mix. But I'm going in the opposite direction of the sweetening agents that were grapefruit and cinnamon syrup, and doing a grapefruit and cinnamon bitters. So that's going to be coming out for the holidays, and I'll have 300 bottles of that to sell. I am, in fact, working on another book. That probably won't be out until this time next year, so not really worth talking about yet. We got waylaid. We were writing another book when the pandemic hit, and it just threw everything off. We were almost ready to go to photography on that one, but a lot of the copy that I had written in that book had to do with a lot of people and a lot of businesses that have now kind of gone away, so we had to rethink the idea. But I am working on another book, and I'm also working on a self-published book, which will be all bartender's choice. So I'm going to be launching that hopefully before the end of November, where we will take pre-orders for the book itself, and we'll have 100 recipes in the book, all based on the first 100 people to pre-order, right? They'll fill out a questionnaire, and I'll make a cocktail just for them. And then I have an artist who's going to make a piece of art that goes with it. So when you open the book, each page is a piece of art and a cocktail that matches, and with a story that says, this cocktail is for Jane. Jane loves sitting by fires and wearing flannel shirts. This cocktail is called the Campfire Old Fashioned, and it involves these things, So something like that. And we hope to make that into a series and do it yearly.
Oh, that's super cool. And I mean, if you're talking about a Christmas gift that's unique, I mean, if you can get on that first line of 100 people, get their name put in a book or a cocktail created for them, that's a great gift idea. If you can get on early, of course.
Yeah. The goal was to get this done maybe last month, but things get in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. And where should people look for updates for kind of the things you're working on, and like when the bitters get released, when the book you can start doing pre-orders and stuff? What's the best place for people to find out any information like that?
Sure. My phone number is 50. Whoa. I think today the answer is always the same, right? It's Instagram. You can follow me at Instagram. I am Creative Drunk, but I'm Creative Drunk everywhere: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then so you can follow me at any of those things. But Creative Drunk is where I'm probably the most active. I do have a website, creativedrunk.com. You can go there. There are links there to buy my books right now that are personalized. So you can, give me whatever you want me to write in the cover, and I'll ship them right out to you myself.
Very cool. Well, Sother, thank you so much again for your time. And we'll definitely have links to everything we talked about in the show notes. And definitely go pick up a copy of either of his books for the holidays. Definitely worth it. So thanks again, Sother.
Hey, man, my pleasure. Thank you.
So So once again, thank you to Sother Teague for his time and sharing all his ideas around holiday cocktails and some of the flavors that he really pulls from for winter and holiday drinks. So we can find links to both of his books and all the cool things that he's up to over at abarabove.com, as well as all of our bar tools. So I've mentioned this in the past, but we have some fantastic bar tools. I'll put them up against anybody else's, and I think you'll enjoy them as well. So head on over to abarabove.com and you can find links and our bar tools there. Cheers, everyone. Have a great holiday.